Hey everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. It's been ages.
Yep.
Yes. And some of you who might be following our work, we don't only have this podcast, we also have our conference wing, which is called Areopagus, the Areopagus project. And we just winded up our
Areopagus 2022.
exactly. Yes. And now we open to season 4 of this podcast.
Wow.
I can't believe we've
Three
made it
seasons are
this
done,
far.
man. 3 seasons.
3 seasons. That's crazy. And which episode is this?
Episode 63.
Damn. That is 63. That is crazy.
And right now we are recording. Obviously, you see there's a lot of difference in sort of the setup and all of that. So we just shaking things around. We're both in the same apartment, so that's a blessing to do this together with this setup. And we right now we are recording in May, but by the time this comes out, we will have officially completed 3 years of
3
SAFT
years.
Apologetics on June 1st.
Wow.
We'll be stepping into a fourth year.
Dang. 3 years. Of
3 years
that.
went by so fast.
Yeah. Usually, something that you hear about podcasts is that, by the 8th episode, they'll usually fail. We made it past to 63 episodes. So almost, 8 times the amount? Once we get to episode 64, we've gotten to 8 times the amount.
Even I was doing the multiplication in my mind.
Yeah. We made it far. We made it
Yeah,
far.
man.
Really.
And the conference, that was just amazing.
The conference was amazing.
I mean, not to blow our own horn, but as attendees, and I'm looking at it as a person who attended the conference to learn, than as the organizer of the conference. For me, it was just brilliant hearing all the speakers and the Q&A and the questions that came in. What was the session that you liked the most, and what was the session that you went in with most expectations?
So the one that I loved the most, and that actually was kind of like an underdog in the sense, was Linda Sena.
Yes. Yes.
When you said that, yes, I knew you were gonna say. It's just amazing the way that she talked about Christianity and sexuality, and about her journey, about when she had the desire to transition to become a male, and all of that stuff. And she was having a lot of mental anguish behind that. And usually when you within Christian circles, when we talk about trans issues and stuff like that, people kind of, even though they try not to, they do have that spite, a little bit of spite, or a little bit of condescension or something like that. But over here, the way that she talked about it was with so much love. Though she just, you could understand that she really had that experience within that sort of life, and the way that she came out of it, it's amazing. You should probably go take a look at the recording, which is all uploaded on our YouTube page. So our channel page.
Yeah, you do.
YouTube page. I sound like a
transitioning between
60-year-old.
Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Yeah,
And the other day you were telling to someone about go follow our Facebook. No, go follow our YouTube channel.
Oh
So
yeah, go
subscribe.
for yeah, Twitter terminologies in YouTube. You don't know which one to keep track of. Yeah.
And the best part about Linda's was that, like you said, it was someone who went through the experience.
Yeah.
So it was someone who understood what it means to be in that, because it's a very tricky situation. And also it's a very hot topic to talk about. Like the moment you say that, you know what, I don't think people are picking up stones to hurl at you.
Yeah.
Just as a sign that you are not excelling on the same board and agreeing with them completely.
Yeah.
And so the stunning part with her presentation, obviously we discussed it right away, is that when she was looking at different forms of sexual engagements, and it spanned from pedophilia to bestiality on all of that, and she was connecting that to the biblical idea of God's nature. And that was mind. I have
Really
never seen anyone do that, and just so convincing, because as a Christian, you can't argue otherwise.
Yes.
And the other thing is that when we talk about the concept of marriage, we often tend to think it as something that you do when you get to a certain age, right? Marriage that is happened, that's cultural
It's
norm.
a certain point
When you get
in
a
my
point,
life.
especially within our Indian culture, our Indian audience will obviously relate to. You get to a certain point, you get a job, people like, so when are you going to start thinking about marriage? So coming from that, we asked the question, okay, why did God institute marriage? What is marriage supposed to reflect? Is it image of something? And then that starts into this core topic of how marriage reflects what God has instituted and the idea of the Christ and the church and all that, and becomes very theological. And that is the depth that marriage has to it. And she brought it not only just a theological discourse going into these esoteric depths and trying to connect stuff, but then she connected it to what we made sense of, what we could understand. And she was connecting to real issues. So that was definitely the underdog. I think a lot of people didn't know about Linda Saylor and what she was able to bring to stage. So a lot of people didn't have much expectations or didn't know about it. But that was by far the session that blew my mind.
Yeah.
Now, the session that you had the most expectations for.
The session...
No, that could include Q&As also. So...
Right, yeah. The one that I had most expectations for was obviously, okay, I'm not gonna... It's the day that I led, but that was because we had the most superstars in there.
Yeah.
We had Frank Turek, we had Hugh Ross, we had...
Justin Bradley.
We had Justin Bradley as the roundtable panelist, and the Q&A... But that also was like really good. I mean, they really exceeded my expectations, especially by the Q&A. The way that we set it up this time was not like a simple, there's a question asked and then it's answered by the expert. Over here we have Frank Turek, Hugh Ross, and Justin all together, and they're just jamming together.
There was a banter between them that was just going about. It was just simply sitting and it was so good to be listen and be
just
part
a
of.
fly on the wall.
Yes, exactly.
It's just so amazing to hear such great minds when they think like that and the way that they're discussing, and also the questions that you guys sent in were brilliant. All 3 days, it was just absolutely brilliant. And
the day the questions that actually stood out to me the most was day 2. So day 2, I kept noting this to our speakers, especially to Tyson, who was our first speaker of day 2. By the way, you can see all of these recordings on our YouTube channel. Is that the questions kept the speakers on their toes?
Oh yeah,
there were some really tough questions. We were encouraging we were encouraging the attendees to say, come with your toughest question. And that wasn't meant to be sort of like a cliche term to be used. We actually meant that. Bring your
not
tough
rhetorical.
We are bringing some of the best speaking minds. You bring your tough questions and ask them. Exactly. And day 2 deliver that. People came with the toughest question that I was thinking about, how on earth am I going to answer that? Thankfully, we had an expert panel that was capable to deal with it.
But it was so good. Like, they were also kind of like, just like taken aback. They're like, wow. These are actually good. Usually when they have these open Q&As and stuff, people would come with the cookie cutter questions, and they was most probably used to hearing that, and they might have expected that, but I'm so glad that we had attendees who were the quality of attendees was really good. And
and staying back.
Exactly. There were people who stayed back. So especially if we were to talk about our platform, AirMeet, is this amazing platform that allows us to hold online conferences with a feeling of how it would be like if you were in an offline conference. Now, what does that mean? It means like if you're in an offline conference, let's say like, for example, you have a Zoom conference and compare that to an offline conference. In a Zoom conference, you just sit there. Maybe you switch on your camera, maybe you don't.
You're just on a call.
Yeah, you're just essentially on a call and you're just listening to the person speak. There's a Q&A session. You just type it in the chat to whoever it is, and then that's it. There's not really much.
There's no engagement with the other attendees.
Exactly. There's no engagement with the other attendees. It feels very isolated. And plus also when you switch on the camera, you feel like there's more pressure on you because everyone can see you.
Yeah.
Over here, the AirMeet platform has made it so much that it would be more akin to an offline conference. And in an offline conference, what you could do is you can get in with your friends and, attend the conference and feel like as if you're part of the conference. Essentially, you are part of the conference, but then you get out of the conference, you can talk with other people, right? Discuss, jam on stuff outside of the conference, and AirMeet has kind of like allowed that.
You get to do stuff. Than just be part of stuff.
Exactly.
So the thing, what happened is that after each session, so this didn't happen in day 1, this happened in day 2 and 3 specifically. So day 2 ended and we told our Q&A host, all the speakers, you know what, you can head out of the event page and go to the lounge, which is sort of like, and the way AirMeet has made it is that they've made it as lounge and they named it as tables, just like you would see with an offline conference. So the speakers went and they joined some tables, and by then itself, I don't think 6 or 8 attendees, they went into a table and they all sat around. They started talking about introducing each other, talking about different topics. And this was people from across the world. So we had one of the attendees from the US who was connected with Reasons to Believe as one of the scholars, if I recall right, painter. I think Dan Painter. Jim Painter. There you go. And then we had people from India. They were coming together talking. And then the speakers went in. And day 3, Linda went in and she was talking to, I remember for day 2, Lydia, she went in and she was talking to the audience. And then she was like, you know what, I'm going to put my lunch into the microwave and come back and get into on the conversation. And then to speak as organizers, that's something that we all were ecstatic about. To see that we were able to, the Lord used us to provide a platform and a conference that was not just something for people to attend, but also an enriching experience for them to be a part of. And then being able to do it with women in apologetics was a true delight, working with them, partner with them with such great women of faith. But yeah, that's it about
the conference.
Reflection
we
on
could
the
keep
conference.
talking about it forever and ever. But I mean, it was just a delight. Yeah. So, yeah, let's get into the topic.
Yep.
And what have we been talking till now about?
Yeah. So our audience may recollect that we started this new series on natural theology, which is basically we're going to look at arguments for God's existence. And the last episode we stopped at was, can you prove you exist? And we were looking at the burden of proof, the nature of proving something. If you're presenting an argument, do we need to prove it with certainty? Or do we show that, this is more plausible, as in more reasonable. So an example to say would be, if you say that the universe began to exist, what is more reasonable? The universe began to exist, or the universe did not begin to exist? So is A more plausible, or is it the opposite of A? The negation, as philosophers would say it, the falsity of A, which is more plausible. And that is sort of the level of proof that we apply every time in our daily life. Right? I mean, today I had for breakfast, well, not really breakfast, I just had a sip of black coffee. I don't know if that comes as a breakfast. But I have a memory of having black coffee.
Yeah.
Now, do I really know for sure that I did have black coffee, or is that a false memory? Well, what is more plausible?
Right.
I don't see any reason to think that it is a false memory.
Right.
So it is more plausible, or it is more reasonable to think that I actually did have black coffee for breakfast. And so that is sort of the burden of proof that we apply day in, day out with every sort of decision making. And so we're just going to look along that same line to look at different arguments for God's existence and see whether we can have enough reasons or enough justification to say that it is reasonable that God exists. And how we're going to do it is that, this we mentioned before, we're going to look at 20-minute episodes, brief, short, people can easily listen to, bite-sized, all of that. Right. And we're going to look at 5 arguments for God's existence. So we're going to start off with the Kalam, which we'll touch up today. The Kalam Cosmological argument, one of our favorites. Then we will be looking at the fine-tuning argument, the moral argument. 4 arguments actually: fine-tuning, moral argument, and then the argument from the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which is sort of the crux of the Christian faith. And so that is sort of the general overview of this. I know that you have some questions in mind as I give up, because this is a very different pattern from what we've been normally used to doing. Yeah, I mean, do I have any questions? Well, one question that I thought about when I was thinking about the pattern itself was, when are guests coming back? Because we were laying the outline, and it was just me, Piyush, and it's just us through day in, day out. And even when we stopped for a bit, and when we had, I think when we had J. Warner Wallace also, the question was coming to me, okay, we are starting this series on philosophy. Do we get to have guests back, or is it just going to be us? So what we have in mind is that we will finish an argument, and that will mean us breaking down, going through it, defining it, explaining all of that. And then we'll take maybe a couple of episodes responding to common objections. Even for the Kalam right now, in one of our videos, a person has dropped a lengthy comment as some other objection to Kalam. I don't think the video he was commenting on said anything about the Kalam, but anyway. So we will be looking at such sort of objection that you will come across in your daily life to equip you on how to respond to it. And then the idea is that we will look at some really tough questions or questions that you can send in. You can go to speakpipe.com/SAFT podcast. You can record your audio question that we'll feature on the podcast. We can email it to us, and those questions, and then the really tough, complicated questions. The idea is that if we get those questions, we can bring in one of the experts on the topic.
Right.
And when you think about Kalam, the expert is Dr. Craig. There are other experts as well, so we can bring in.
But he's the one who came up with the name.
He's the one who. So we'll be looking at that in the overview. So he's the brain behind the Kalam cosmological argument in its entirety. Bring the guests on for these Q&A clearing and all that stuff. So that is sort of the idea that we have in sort of mellowing out how the entire series is going to go with. I think we're coming towards the end of this episode. We've sort of given an overview.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? You want to touch up on an overview of the Kalam, or?
Yeah, I mean, before we end, just give them a taste of what Kalam is.
So I'll quickly touch upon two things. One is the nature of the Kalam cosmological argument. So we discussed about how there are two types of arguments: deductive arguments and inductive arguments. So we mentioned how deductive arguments are basically you have premises or statements, and if those statements are true, and the logic connecting each of the statement is legitimate, valid, then the conclusion that it is leading towards will be inevitable.
Right.
So it's airtight.
Yeah.
So there are two ways which you can disprove that argument. You either show that one of that statement is false, or you say that the logic doesn't hold. So showing a statement false is pretty straightforward. It makes sense, right? If you say something like, if Caesar was the emperor, yada yada yada. Now you can show that the Caesar was not the emperor. That's possible to show. That's an easy way. When it comes to showing that the logic is invalid, it would be showing something like, the word you used, Caesar, in statement 1 was you were referring to an emperor. But when you use the word Caesar in statement 2, you are referring to the salad Caesar. And that sort of way. So that is sort of like an error in reasoning. We call it false equivocation. You are equivocating, like bringing together or holding together two separate things with different meanings. And you're sort of like, it's sleight of hand. Like you're slightly pushing in through an argument by mixing it up. So in those
it's
ways,
called false equivocation.
False equivocation. So you're trying to equate two different things. And it is not a true equation because...
Right, because the first one was Julius Caesar and the second one is Caesar salad.
Yeah. So we show in those ways that the logic is invalid and therefore the argument fails. And so the Kalam is following that same format. And the structure of the Kalam cosmology argument, very simple, easy to remember. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Statement 1. Statement 2 says, the universe began to exist. And therefore, the conclusion is, the universe began to exist. The universe has a cause. So everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. So this is a very simple, straightforward way to pointing towards the conclusion that the universe has a cause of its beginning to exist. And so this is what we'll be looking in depth in the series. And with the next episode, I think we'll dive head in to what the Kalam is, the overview, and all of that. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you all for watching. And yes, for the questions, it'll be linked in our show notes and also in the description for our YouTube video as well. So please make sure to put in your questions about the Kalam cosmological argument, about all of the different topics that we'll be doing henceforth. So yeah, thank you so much for watching.
See you in the next one.